were living in Lartaine, yeah. So we'll give them a name, we'll call them Celts, yeah, because that's the group name we'll give to all these kind of people. When you read Julius Caesar, you find out that the Celts were people who lived in central France, right, as we would call it, Gauls. Not all the Gauls were Celts, yeah. Some of the Gauls were called Belgae, yeah, and there are other people down in the southwest of France, in a place called Guasguin, who are also, or Gascony as we would say now, who were not Celts. And actually the Celts, so-called, are described in the ancient histories of the Romans and people as being quite tall people with either blonde hair and blue eyes or red hair, right? Now, the ancient Britons were not like that. The ancient Britons, we have descriptions of the Cymry, the people from South Wales, for example, that tell us there are fairly short people, stocky, with dark hair, and a bit swarthy of appearance. They were Mediterranean people, yeah? So they're not the tall, beautiful blonde Celts that the scientists are telling us they were. They weren't like that at all. They were completely different people. Yet we have this name Celts, and they never ever called themselves Celts, and the Britons were never called Celts until about 1705. And
doesn't that like mean like brutal or something like that? It's a kind of denotative term, I guess.
Well, I've nothing against the term. It's just it's not accurate.
Right.
It's like calling the French Italians or something. You know,
okay,
it's not accurate. I mean, nothing against the Italians, but it's not true, is it?
Right.
So it'd be like calling you in Sweden and saying, well, you're Germans. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, your language is obviously a bit similar to German. You must be Germans. It's not true.
No.
You're separate peoples. So this is kind of what we're up against when we start delving a bit more deeply into areas that scientists and people like archaeologists don't want you to open this can of worms, you know.
Yeah.
They're quite happy with the kind of settled views. They're professors. They're teaching this stuff in their universities. They've got a job for life. They've come up through the ranks. They've climbed the greasy pole. They've got to where they are. They don't want you coming along showing everything that they're teaching is nonsense.
Yeah. I mean,
so we were up.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. So Robert Bauval was up against this, and I was along with him when we brought out this whole subject about the Orion mystery.
Yeah.
Was showing we had a fascinating time. It really was fun. I can't begin to tell you what fun it was, because we got to know the guy Rudolf Gantenbrink, who sent the little robot up the shaft.
You know, right.
You remember us reading about that.
Yeah.
And Rudolf was somewhat constrained about what he could say. He made this fantastic discovery of this little door with the hooks on it, and the Egyptians weren't saying anything. Yeah, nobody knew about this, right? And he sent a video to Robert, and Robert said, "Well, why aren't you announcing this? This is fantastic."
Yeah.
So, well, I can't, you know, because of channels and blah blah blah.
Why? So, do you know why that was? Who was keeping it back?
Partly it's because it's all a matter of pride.
For the Egyptians.
For the Egyptians, and here you have this German guy, Rudolf Gantenbrink, who almost as a, you know, by the way, said, "Can I look in this shaft?" Nobody's been looked in this properly. And, you know, at that time, they thought it was only about 8 meters long.
Yeah.
So he had to build this little robot to climb up this thing, because it doesn't come out the other side. And he found this door. Well, he should have been given all the credit for that. I mean, he put his own money into this. He put his own time and effort into making this discovery. So these guys should have said, "Fantastic discovery, you know, Rudolf. You'll go down in the history books as being the guy who discovered that little door, and we must see what we can do about probing it and looking further." Yeah. But of course, it doesn't work like that. You know, all sorts of political considerations come in then. The German Archaeological Institute in Cairo become frightened that if they start rocking the boat saying too much, they'll lose their license. You know, the guy who's the head of the antiquities at the time, he would like to have some credit for this. Yeah. And then there's the whole question about who owns the pictures. Yeah. Because these pictures are worth a lot of money. Yeah. You can sell them to the networks, in America and Europe and get them to pay money. And, this money, who's it going to go to? Is it going to go to Mr. Gantenbrink, or is it going to go into the pocket of someone, or is it going to go to further archaeology? There's all these kind of considerations, and they sort of forget about the fantastic excitement about this discovery.
Yeah, exactly.
So he sent this tape over, and Robert took it round and showed it to the people in the newspapers over here, and they went bananas.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think that is this the main reason why it's taking so incredibly long time? I mean, where is number 2 robot? They've been talking about this for years now, but nothing seems to be happening.
Yeah, well, Rudolph, God bless Rudolph. Robert and I, we showed that film to the senior staff at the British Museum, right? There's the top guys there. And, they had no more clue than anyone else about what they were looking at on that TV picture. And then we got Rudolph over, and he brought the robot with him, and he actually gave it to the British Museum in perpetuity.
Yeah.
With one proviso. It's actually there. They haven't got it on display. I don't know if they'd let you see it. They might do if you went and asked, particularly, and said, I want to see Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot.
Yeah.
But with one proviso that they would lend it back to him if needed it to do further research. Well, of course, by that time, the Egyptians were hopping mad, and they weren't going to let him back in. They haven't let him back in to carry on his research. And he'd offered to do it for free, to build a second robot if needed. Then when that wasn't good enough, he said, right, well, I will teach someone how to use this one, how to do it. Doesn't have to be me, but let's get on and do it.
Yeah, exactly. He's excited. He want to know what actually is up there.
He wants to take this work the next stage.
Right.
No, we must do this under the right protocol.
So weird. It's so strange.
So eventually they get someone else in to build a completely new robot.
Yeah.
And then they send that robot and it's all Zaki Hawass. Dr. Hawass has made this fantastic discovery. Dr. Hawass has drilled the hole, right? Well, this is what happens now in Egyptology, unfortunately. Nobody can do anything unless Dr. Hawass is standing next to them.
That's right.
Claiming the benefit of it.
Exactly.
So Egyptology, I'm afraid, probably for the next generation, has fallen into a deep hole. Nothing's going to get done. I can tell you, I've never actually met Dr. Hawass, and I have got nothing against him personally. But what I am annoyed about is that they have stopped progress when progress could have happened.
Yeah.
Now, back in 1990s, I think it was 1998, 99, I was in touch with an American group who were searching for the Hall of Records near the Sphinx. Right? This is an ongoing thing. You probably heard of Edgar Cayce, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sleeping Prophet, as they call him.
And the
he had made
AAER, is that right?
ARE,
yeah.
Yeah, Association for Research and Enlightenment.
Yes.
Well, he had made predictions that there is a chamber near the Sphinx where there is a Hall of Records. Now, if you're like me, you think, well, that's exciting. Let's go and look for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's got to be your attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
The attitude, and he claimed that these records would show a connection with Atlantis, right? Mm-hmm. That the pyramids and the Sphinx and so on have been built by people from Atlantis at the time of 10,000 BC or thereabouts. Long, long before dynastic Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have an open mind on this. I'm quite happy to accept that the pyramids that we see today are built by the Fourth Dynasty. I don't have any problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious enough to want to know if there might be something earlier.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
This guy, this Edgar Cayce, you could say the guy's a complete crackpot and a nutcase. But some of his, I think nearly all of his health readings that he gave people turned out to be remarkably accurate.
Yeah.
That he could say things, tell people what was wrong with them physically, and the medicine that they needed. He could, tell them exactly what they needed. And sometimes things like he would prescribe a kind of medicine that was no longer available. And they'd say, well, we can't get this. And he'd say, yes, if you go to such and such a chemist shop, in this town here, and it's on the second shelf up at the back. Yeah,
right.
Find a bottle there. Right?
Incredible. Yeah.
And sure enough, they go there and they have a look. Oh yes, there's this old bottle here with a curling label or whatever. So this guy, he's certainly got something, and enough to make you want to investigate what he's saying a bit further.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion. And it may not be totally accurate. I don't know. I've had some dealings with clairvoyants, and I tend to find they're a bit of a mixed bag. That some of what they say seems to be good, others seems to be kind of mishmash of fantasy or misunderstanding symbols, or
it's like what you get in any field of work, isn't it? I mean, there is good craftsmanship and also not, and that happens. Yeah, of course.
So I would never take something someone says just because they said it.
Yeah.
You then say, well, that's interesting. That's a hypothesis. Let's have a look and see what we can do with that, and if we can prove this to be correct.
Yeah.
Or not. And if it's not, fair enough. I'll tell you another little story when I finish this. Anyway, so I was actually in Cairo at the hotel, and I was waiting for this party of Dr. Joseph Shaw, who was funding an investigation. He had been doing this for years. And in fact, he was one of the backers of the ARE, and he had actually paid for the education of Dr. Zaki Hawass. So, this guy is not an idiot, and he's not a nut. He's actually had been a very high up member of the board of a large drug company in America, and he had used his money to set up a foundation to investigate what Edgar Casey had said.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'd been doing surveys around Giza, looking for this secret chamber, using ground-penetrating radar and so forth. And they got some interesting anomalies. They found the spots that they wanted to look, right?
Yeah.
And they got permission from the Egyptians to carry out a dig, right? To have a look in this particular place. So you can't just sort of go along with a spade and say, "Can I dig here?" My clairvoyance told me that if I dig right here, I'm going to find the tomb of Imhotep or something. You can't do that. It doesn't work. You've got to have an academic university behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was working with Florida State University, had been for years, and was funding them to send over a team of archaeologists, and booked all their flights, booked their hotels. Everything was set up. I was going to be there to act perhaps as the documentarist of this, write it all up. So I was there as well, and I was waiting because I was already in Egypt for another reason. And then they didn't show, and I got a message saying that they weren't coming after all. And it turned out that at the last minute, the Egyptians had turned around and said, "No, I'm sorry, you can't come here. It's not politically advisable."
Really?
So, this is kind of what you're up against. I mean, you and I, we want to know the answers now. We don't want to wait sort of 30 years.
Of course not.
And then, 30 years time, oh yes, we'll send another robot up. We'll close that door, and maybe something.
I got to be honest with you, Adrian. I think something else is going on, and I think that the seeming troubles, so to speak, on the surface are there to kind of dull all of our interest in this in a little bit. I think that they've already actually been behind there themselves, without the cameras, without all of that, and try to figure it out. Either there's something, incredibly shocking behind there that they cannot, reveal, or something like that. I don't know what's going on. It's a guess. I cannot prove that, but it's just a feeling that I have when I'm watching this circus here.
Well, I'll give you another, little clue on this. When that door was first found, shortly afterwards, I was put in touch with a clairvoyant lady over here by her publishers. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not someone that goes running around to clairvoyance all the time. I'm not like that, but I do have an open enough mind
to
be interested in these people. And sometimes they say,